I am so pleased. Thank you ever so much, and welcome to Charlotte today, who has joined us from Badger Education. Thank you so much for joining us today, Charlotte.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, we got you on today to have a chat about parenting, and the series this podcast is about, are you the perfect parent? And every person that I'm kicking off with is my first question into them before they can ask anything else or answer anything else is, Charlotte, are you a perfect parent?
And if you get a yes out of anyone, that's going to
Yeah,
be the end of the episode.
yeah,
What
it
are you
will. Yeah, finish.
going to do? No, I'm definitely not the perfect parent. I think I've learned a lot along the way and I'm better. Is that right? Am I better than I used to be? I don't know. I'm different. You develop, don't you?
Yeah.
Um, but no, I'm definitely not perfect. We have some days where I think, oh, that was all right. And then there are other days where it was an absolute disaster
Yeah.
still.
You
But I
know
don't
that,
think I've ever claimed to be perfect, no.
do you know that sense of being that kind of that perfect parent? Do you get a sense of where that comes from? Why do you think as parents we kind of aspire to this being a perfect parent?
I think it's really hard. I think it's the one of the things in life that you come into without any training for, without any idea really of what you're landing yourself. Even if you go on parenting courses when you're pregnant or anything like that, yes, you hear about stuff, but it's so different when you're actually living it. And so you kind of go into it with no knowledge or skills, so you kind of always feel a little bit like you're on the back foot, or certainly I did. um our eldest was like the first baby that we really had anything to do with, like it was the first in our family, and I didn't have
Yeah.
friends who already had babies, so I very much felt like I didn't know what I was doing. But then there's all these, from when they're tiny, there's so much advice, and you
Yeah.
should do this, and there's all these shoulds, and you hear them all the time, whether it's when you're going to get them weighed, or whether it's from a friend on the phone, or whether it, now online, you're bombarded by things all the time. And that then carries on, doesn't it? Because you see snippets of people's life, and everyone likes to put the nice stuff out there. So you
Absolutely.
see these lovely images of everyone having a nice time, or you might occasionally hear a funny story of a complete disaster. Those are out there as well. But there's very much this sort of shiny, rosy image all around. And I also think that you kind of, even if you don't intentionally, when you think of having a family, you kind of have an image of what you are imagining family life is going to be
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
And that's probably a little bit perfect, a little bit white picket fence, nice house, lovely garden, lovely
Isn't
perfect
it? And it's that
family,
kind of
having picnic.
stereotypical, isn't it? Two parents
Yeah, yeah,
with two kids, maybe a dog in the background, lovely little house,
yeah,
and you bake cakes, and he goes
yeah,
off to work, and the kids are beautifully behaved at every
yeah.
opportunity. They all go to
And they go to
school.
bed nicely, and you have an
Yeah,
evening to yourself, and all those things.
yeah,
I don't know where it all comes from. I suppose some of it is sort of ingrained historically, isn't it?
yeah.
Some of it is still that 2.2 children and that sort of, yeah, society view of things. Um, but you have no, like, before I was pregnant and before we were having a family, yes, I worked in special needs schools. So you'd have thought I would have had some of those, like, oh, it could be something totally different. I still had that image of, you don't ever think you're going to have a child who's different or has difficulties
Yeah.
or has a medical complication, or
Yeah.
and those things don't enter your head. And yes, some people have those during pregnancy, and
Mm,
that must shatter everything straight away. Our eldest um, came 7 weeks early. I was still at work
mm,
when my waters broke with him. And that was then suddenly, no one had talked about premature birth. No one had talked about special care, none of that. That was absolute shock to the
yeah.
system. And because I guess I have that special needs school background, immediately part of my kind of then mentality was he's been premature, he may well have
Mhm,
long-term difficulties from
mm,
that.
mm.
Um, yeah, so that's then in the back of your head. But that, for most people, if you go on to have a normal birth, whatever, even then, you're still picturing this glorious, beautiful life, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
And then you get the screaming baby home and you haven't slept for 24 hours and you're rocking in the corner and it all goes downhill quick. But
No one really prepares you for that, do they, at all?
no,
You
no.
think everyone kind of goes, oh, it's a bit tricky in the beginning. And you think when you're in it, tricky?
Yeah,
Someone wasn't telling me the whole truth.
yeah,
And it's funny you should say as well about the prematurity stuff as well, because my son, my youngest, was prem. So he was born 6 weeks early. And like you
yeah.
say, I'd already had one by that point, but it, it, that again is something you just never, you're not prepared for.
No.
And I think a lot of the time, I don't know about you, but I always feel like sometimes, well, a lot of the time with my parenting, is kind of you're winging it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what works for one
Absolutely.
doesn't work for the other.
No, you learn for one of them and you think, oh, I'm going to crack this the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And then this child arrives who's totally different.
Yes.
Nothing you've learned is the
Yeah.
same or works the same. And you've already got one in the mix. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's never going to be the same
No.
because you're juggling more than one anyway. And you're different from the experiences you've had the first time round. And some of that's positive. You've learned things, you've develop things, but then like you say, you've got this different human in front of you, so it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily help in any way, shape or form.
No,
And
it really
it
doesn't.
is a winging it, it's always totally winging it.
Yeah.
And there's some joy in that. Whilst it's hard, I do quite enjoy that it's not like a planned programmed thing, that every
Yeah.
day is like completely different and you can't imagine what the future's going to bring. That's something that
Mm.
I really love about parenting, is finding out who these little humans are
Yeah.
and where they're going, and that is really magical, but it comes with an immense amount of challenge and yeah, day to day.
And it's almost that thing of kind of I've got to get it right.
Yeah,
And what is right, I suppose,
yeah,
is always my question that goes through my head is what's right for one family isn't necessarily right for my family, and what I might need to do, another parent wouldn't need to do. So, and what my one child might need, the other one doesn't. And we have this sense, and I don't know about you, I have this very strong sense of I have to get it right, otherwise I'm failing everybody, me, the
yeah.
kids, everybody, and I need to get it right. And that's a really hard thing to sit with too, and to try and navigate is around that being right or wrong.
Yeah. And you can't play out the two different scenarios. Like, if I do this, am I going to get the right outcome or should I do that? Well, you can't do both of them. You can't see what that outcome's going
You
to
got to pick
be.
one and
You
cross your
yeah,
fingers.
yeah.
It's really hard, that really hard. So I know that was a really big question that I kind of dived straight into. I didn't even give you a chance to warm up there, Charlotte. Um, but I suppose it'd be really good to know. We've obviously there's been a little intro that I've done for you, but could you tell us a bit about you and what it is you do, a bit about Badger Education and what it is you doing?
Yeah, so I'm setting up at the moment as an independent autism education consultant, which sounds like a right mouthful. But I want to work with education staff to improve their knowledge and understanding of particularly their autistic pupils, so that everyone gets the benefit of that, so that their classrooms can be calmer and more regulated, which obviously is a benefit for them as the adults there, but for all the pupils as well, so that everyone's more ready to learn and engage. And I think, the more and more we're seeing, the needs that are coming into mainstream classrooms are higher and higher. And you can get all political about that, but it's not going to change overnight anytime
Yeah,
soon. So it's about giving those staff that are in front of those children the best possible skills to be able to do the day-to-day work that's going to support and affirm and nurture those kids that are presented with to them every morning.
yeah,
And I know from when I did my teacher training, and I'm from everyone I speak to, it hasn't changed much. There just isn't any detail on special needs and what you might come across. When I did my teacher training, which, okay, is like 20 odd years ago, but we had one afternoon about special needs, and that was it in the whole course.
yeah.
So, mainstream staff
Tiny, isn't it?
aren't knowledgeable in the children that they're being presented with now. And so they feel like they haven't got the skills.
Mm,
And from my point of view, I don't know a single person that went to work in education who doesn't want to do the right thing by the young people.
Yeah.
That's why people go into it. So let's give them the skills that we can
Yeah.
so that they can, yeah, do the best job
And I
possible.
don't think I ever realised that really about how little training teachers got. I mean, I've got both my parents are ex-teachers, but that was from a little while ago now. Um, but you think, in this day and age when with the diagnostics around and the awareness increasing, it could be way better than it is, but
Yeah.
obviously that awareness is better than it used to be. To have such small amounts of training for teaching staff is I was really shocked when I heard about that, about how little training and support they
Yeah.
got for that.
And I think it's so hard. And, the vast majority of teachers want to do the right thing. But if they
Yeah.
don't have that knowledge, then they're left floundering
Yeah.
and then they feel like they're failing. You know, they don't manage the classroom as well as they could.
Mm.
Learning doesn't happen for people.
Mm.
That disruption can be really, really real. And that's no good for anyone. It leaves
Yeah.
everyone, yeah, coming away feeling awful and like they've failed. So yeah, let's give them the knowledge and skills that we can. So I'm working to develop some online training so that that's accessible, yeah, to anyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and I've got free resources out there already and a nice free professionals group on Facebook that's, yeah, developing different conversations and is a great place for people to go and collaborate. I always say to everyone, I don't want to be stood up in front of you lecturing. It's a collaboration. You will have knowledge, you will have
Mm.
things you've tried that worked. You might not know why they work. Let's find out what it was behind that, and that collaboration is really, really important.
Do you think as teachers, and it's just kind of popped into my head now, and Charlotte, you probably kind of know me quite well now that my brain goes but just popping into my head then, do you think as a teacher that you draw on your parenting experience as teachers? Do you think generally that's what teachers will do if they've got kids?
Yeah, I think quite a lot do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose
Um,
where the difference might come is, I suppose, is if you've got, as a teacher, if you have then got neurodivergent kids, then you might have an alternative style or a way
yeah.
of working, and that you would draw on your behavior, on your parenting skills into your kind of teaching role.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot. And often when I'm, talking with staff, they might even say, oh, I've got a nephew who struggles with whatever, and we've
Okay.
tried this, or, so I think that, yeah, that wider experience does definitely come into it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think sometimes as well, isn't it? It can be tricky, and I hear parents talk about sometimes it's tricky, the relationship between parents and school, and that kind of that understanding. And I suppose when I listen to you talk, about the fact there's very little training around, and also I think some of the stuff I've come across is that the intentions are there. There's a good intention often behind it. They might get it wrong, and we only know what we know, right?
Yeah.
So the work that you're doing, being able to support those teachers is so crucial, so that they know the stuff, they know what they
Yeah.
need to know. But I suppose that it has such a big effect. And I suppose that's where I see sometimes that's where the lines of communication break down, I suppose, between parents sometimes in school, and parents feeling unheard or misunderstood.
Yeah.
And that's a
And I
tricky
think
place from both sides.
I think parents are really amazing at researching and
Yes.
finding out what they need to know. Like, because you're living it 24/7, you have to, don't you? You
Yeah.
have to go and find the stuff you don't know yet. Um, and that's really different, isn't it, for teachers? In a mainstream class, they've got 30 children, and with the best will in the world, they might really want to go and find out all the stuff, but they've got all the rest of their job that is already going on,
Mm.
and the paperwork side of things, and it just is
Yeah.
bonkers these days, absolutely bonkers. So I think often parents are real experts
Yeah.
by necessity. And that's kind of not necessarily seen by other people. It's something
Mm.
that, again, I talk about all the time is use that expert knowledge.
Yeah.
As parents, we have knowledge of our kids from every situation you can imagine, whether it's a party, whether it's the shops, whether it's watching TV, whatever it is, we have so much specialist knowledge on our individual kids. And I always talk to schools and say, you have to really value that as expert knowledge, just as you would any other professional. Use that to help you. And I've very much been in the parenting situation where that wasn't the case. And it's really distressing when you're kind of treated as just mum or just dad. Like it's awful.
It's a real change, isn't it? I think I experienced that too, coming from being a professional in that kind of world and then moving into being a parent, and how little my voice was heard,
Yeah.
even with the experience and the jobs that I've done.
Yeah.
My voice became very, very small in those meetings, and I think that was a huge learning curve for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely was for me. And I mean, I even had it sort of the fact that I was a professional in that world was almost made my parenting view even less worthy.
Yeah,
Like I was constantly told, well, you're just seeing that because that's what you work with.
yeah,
You're just expecting that because you know too much, kind of thing. Which, like, I don't know. I don't know where else in the world that would happen. You
yeah,
would go to a professionals meeting and have them say, oh, you just know too much about that, so we
yeah,
don't need to
yeah.
listen to
So that
you.
doesn't
What?
count anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
we
What on
discount that
earth?
bit. Yeah, and like you say, where in the, what other job would that happen in? That you went and actually your view then wouldn't be.
Yeah, your expertise makes
Yeah,
your view less valuable. Sorry?
yeah. So strange, isn't it? It's really strange. I suppose just thinking, flipping back to your parenting, and what's been your experience of parenting, Charlotte? That's a really big, wide question. But what's been your experience of parenting?
So we've got three children
Yeah,
who are now about to be 17, 14, and about to turn 13. And the experience with each and every one has been completely different. Um, but yeah, you then kind of get that layered effect, don't you, of what you've learned from one and is it useful with the next?
yeah,
But I mean, just everything's changed in that space of time. So with our eldest being premature, like I said, I was in work. So I was taken to hospital and my husband came to then meet us there. Um, and just silly things like we both had mobile phones, but neither of those phones then had a camera on.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's how things have changed. Like, yes, yeah, you could ring and you could text, and that was it.
yeah,
And when you think now, like, you're never anywhere without a camera because your
yeah,
phone has a camera. And that change in itself is just, I always find incredible in really quite a short space of time. Like
yeah,
16 years isn't that long a time. Um, but yeah, parenting, just every day brings something different and unique. And that, yeah, that awful word I was thinking, journey. What else do you use other than journey
yeah.
though? I don't know.
Path,
Um,
route, what way forwards?
yeah,
Yeah,
that map of life is just, yeah, so intriguing and intricate and just varied. Every single day is
yeah,
just so different. I found those early years really, really challenging myself.
okay,
I don't know, I found babies hard.
yeah,
Um, I think I probably still would. I really struggle with lack of sleep anyway. So
yeah,
that was very difficult. And as were all, well, no, the youngest was a good sleeper from about 9 months, but the other two, our eldest didn't sleep through till he was about 2.5. So we already had the middle one. So then
yeah,
we were up with newborn again, and again he didn't sleep well. I mean, he still doesn't sleep well. He just doesn't need that much sleep. He can, like, you can manage it as they get older. He knows not to come and disrupt us, but when they're a toddler, they just come in and get you, don't they? So I found that side of it really difficult, but just as they've got older, I find it easier, different.
yeah,
I distinctly remember the first Christmas. So our eldest was born right at the beginning of December. And so my mum and dad came up for that first Christmas, brought all the food with them and everything because he wasn't meant to be here yet, and we were in total chaos. And I really remember sitting with my mum one evening, and I think I'd said something like, "Once he sleeps a bit more, I'll find it easier." And I just remember my mum, and she always feels really shameful about it, but I don't think of it shamefully at all. But she just said, "It never gets easier; it just gets different."
Yeah,
And I really like it's so true.
that is
It's
true.
not easier now, it is just different.
Yeah,
And she was like, "Oh, that's such an awful thing to have said to you when you only had a 4-week-old baby." And I always say, "Well, no, it wasn't like you didn't mean it in a horror, it wasn't said in a cutting way or an unkind way. It just was your truth." And actually, I think it's really accurate.
yeah, it is.
The challenges now with teenagers are really different, but it's not any easier. It is just a
Yeah,
different landscape.
yeah.
Um,
I think I had someone say something similar to me, like a little thing that they said to me, because a bit like you, I struggled in the early days, and I had one that never slept and just cried all the time.
yeah,
And like when you said about that sitting in a chair rocking, I remember at night rocking and thinking, I don't know whether I'm trying to get him off to sleep or whether I have lost the plot
the way, yeah,
and I
yeah,
actually need some help. This is so difficult. But somebody said to me, what was it the way they phrased it? It won't last forever. It will pass.
yeah,
And they're right. I think that helped me a bit, I think, when they were younger, that this isn't forever.
yeah,
Something often else replaces it,
yeah.
but
But
it
it
doesn't last
changes.
forever and it
Yeah,
changes.
yeah,
And then you understand. Then I think then when you start to think about it in that way, you start to realize, well, that's why it's so flipping hard. It's because it's like being on quicksand, isn't it? You think
yeah,
you've got it, and like, oh, no, it's gone.
yeah,
Gone again now. And now
absolutely.
I'm learning all over again. And
Yeah,
I've only ever been here once before, as in
yeah,
this moment. And even when you get
yeah.
another kid that's the same age, it's different.
Everything's different. Yeah.
I've never been here before.
No, every day is a
Yeah,
totally new thing. And like you say, yeah, like when they're little and you're trying to kind of get some kind of routine. I remember I'd be thinking, oh yeah, okay, we've had a snack at 10 and we're having our lunch about 12. Oh, we're maybe in a routine. And then the next day,
I know.
no, something totally different would happen. And it is like that, even now, like not for things like meal times and stuff, but yeah, just every day yeah, it's the first time you've been in that situation.
Yeah. And then you think, well,
Um,
no wonder it's hard. No
yeah,
wonder this is tricky and I'm
yeah,
struggling with this, or this isn't easy all the time when everything's moving and you're changing all the time. And some people find that more difficult than others. Some people
yeah,
will adapt to the change and find that much easier, and other people find that bit really, really hard when it keeps
yeah.
changing.
And I think what I've got better at that probably makes the most difference is recognizing that that's okay.
Yes.
It's okay
Yes.
that days might be difficult.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got really young ones and it is all brand new, it's really hard to kind
Mm.
of think like that. But actually, as you progress through things, it is, yeah, I've become more able to say, it's okay. If I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm doing, that's okay. If
Yeah.
today's gone up the Swanee,
Yeah.
it's okay. Have we all survived the day? Yes. Have I fed everyone something and given everyone a drink? Even if they haven't eaten it,
Yeah. Yeah.
have I offered that?
Yeah.
Then that's okay. We're
Yeah.
all we're all still here. And even on the really worst days, we're all still here. It will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think that confidence came from, Charlotte? Do you think something happened? Do you think it was, part of your job? Do you think it's just experience? Where do you think that change started to come, that you started to be able to go, I'm okay with this. This is okay that I don't get it right all the time.
So I think some of it is definitely just experience. I think some of it possibly comes from as you kind of, I was just thinking of gaming then. I was about to say, as you finish each level, like, I don't mean it like that, but like, once the eldest moved into school and we'd kind of managed nursery with him, it's almost like, oh, we did that and we've moved to the next step and we did okay. And I kind of think as we've moved through a few more of those kind of features, I guess, of childhood, you gain a bit more confidence of, oh, I kind of have done that and that
Mm.
felt okay. Um, I think a lot of it probably comes from the difficulties we had with getting our middle one's needs recognized. So from when he was very, very young, a bit like you were saying, from when he was about 4 months, I really knew that he was different somehow to the eldest. Like, really strongly knew it. He didn't sleep, but he also didn't want to be held when he wasn't, like, he didn't want to be held, he didn't want to be touched, he didn't want to be rocked, he didn't want food, he didn't want to drink. He was just very distressed at night, particularly. At night was really hard for him. And however much we sought support for that, we had a hell of a time, as you hear from so many parents. He kind of, to start with, I think, and quite possibly they were right. I think the health visitors thought I was probably suffering with postnatal depression, and I think that was possibly there. But also then, because of that, they kind of disregarded a lot of that experience. Then he kind of had his first, I think they do like a languagey noise, like not speech, but they look out for, are they babbling? Are they doing different ranges of noises? About when he was 1, maybe a bit older. And he kind of was just on the cusp, and they were like, well, we'll check again in a few months. And by the time they checked again, he had kind of caught up again with his motor skills. He was kind of just always on the cusp of those standard development checks. So kind of breezed through. And then his nursery were brilliant with him, and his key worker loved him from the bottom of her soul and would do anything for him. And so he did thrive in that situation, but very much with that real nurturing, close support from her. And he would we talked about it with them loads. He would be on the edge of every activity until he absolutely knew what to do, and then he'd join in. Like, he was an observer, he watched everything. And he wanted to know what to do before he would join in. And then when he moved to school, they weren't knowledgeable enough about what he was finding tricky. So they would say, oh, he's got loads of friends. And if I got there early and saw them out playing, he would be on the edge of every group. Like, he was sociable in that way. He wanted to be part of a group, but he didn't have friends. He didn't, absolutely didn't. And he really, really struggled. Anyway, so he was 9 before he got a diagnosis, diagnosed autistic. But all those years, both of us as parents were basically gaslit. We were told we were imagining it. We were told it wasn't really there. It wasn't happening at school. If he was having meltdowns at home, it was a home problem. All those things, which I know.
Say to you, that bit must have been really hard going through as a parent, and going through it as a first time. Kids really struggling in school.
And I know that that's not a unique experience at all, but I think when we finally got to that diagnosis point, I was furious with everything, and I was devastated for the years that we'd lost of doing it right for him. Because the more people say to you, oh, no, it's not really there, the more we felt, okay, well, we have to treat him like a neurotypical child then, because everyone's saying he's neurotypical, even though you kind of know that's not working. And that's what I found hardest, was all those missed chances to do the right thing by him. And I think after that just gave me that kind of rocket of, you know what you're on about, and when it's right and when it's wrong, and you have to trust that gut. And I think I just,
isn't it, again?
I just had enough of, and there's just that line, isn't there? And I know so many parents struggle with it. You grow up being told that the professionals with the experience know the right things to do, and I genuinely believed that. And then it's really hard, isn't it? Because you can't disregard all professionals. We're both professionals, and we don't have that attitude to other people. So you can't put everyone in that box of, well, they definitely don't know what they're talking about, or I shouldn't listen to them. So then it is that balance of where do I go? Who do I turn to? But I think that whole experience really gave me the confidence of, you're doing okay and you're doing the right thing. You have to just keep going with what you know is right.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think, I can imagine it must have been quite tricky being in those situations, being a parent, but also being a teacher and being sat. Because I mean, for me, I was professional, but I was an OT, so I still was quite removed still from the education environment, although I worked in it and I produced reports for it and I used to go in and work with teachers and stuff like that. But I wasn't actually a teacher. And I
Yeah.
can imagine that must have been tricky to have that balance between being a parent and a teacher and then being in with schools and then knowing you were a teacher and
Yeah. All those things are so, yeah, made it a real tightrope to walk. And even now, though, I find that really hard when I go into schools as a specialist with that teaching background, um, and still find, in some settings, find staff who really have so little knowledge or understanding of
yeah.
all types of neurodivergence. And you just think, I don't know. Sometimes I sit there and think, God, you're like 10 years behind. And then I think, or am I really that specialist that I've kind of lost track of
Mm,
where most education staff are? I don't know. But yeah, that balance when I was teacher and parent and experiencing all that was really hard.
yeah.
Particularly, so we moved abroad when he was going into year 2 when we moved abroad. Um, and we moved to where I was working in the same school as all of them were going to be, which I always swore I would not do. I wouldn't work in the same school as them, just because it is that boundary of when am I parent, when am I professional, how do you manage that?
Charlotte,
And
my dad was a teacher and he came in and taught a class that I was in. It was
yeah,
it was awful, awful.
I just couldn't imagine managing that. Um, so I never wanted to do it, but we moved somewhere where there was only one school. So of course we were all in the
Yeah.
same school because
Yeah.
that's where there was. And I suppose in some ways that was good because that move obviously was a massive change for all of us. And the step to kind of the year 2 curriculum where it gets that bit more academic, it gets
Yeah.
more sat down, more longer time expected. He found that challenging anyway. And then the addition of having moved to somewhere completely new, that was the first time that school staff were kind of going, yeah, we see what,
Okay.
we can definitely see what you're talking about. But that was a really tricky balance because then I was employed there as so they had a special needs base as part of the mainstream primary. So I was teaching in there. So they knew I was the specialist. So you're the specialist, and this is your child, and we
That
see what
sounds
you're
really
seeing. What do we
odd.
do with this? So yeah, that was such a balancing act. And actually, I think because that is their experience for everyone. All the
Mm,
children in that community go to that one school. And so all of them are likely to have either a parent experience or an aunt or a relative teaching there, so that for them, for that community, is quite normal. So
yeah.
it whilst it was hard for me, they were quite used to managing those boundaries of, okay, we're coming to you as a professional or we're talking to you as a parent, kind of thing.
Mm,
And we put some things in place. So I, at points when it got overwhelming, I would say, look, I need you to speak to dad about,
okay.
if there's been something
You just
happening in school,
shifted
like
that.
it needs to just be that bit of boundary. And again, they were brilliant at that. Um, but yeah, so that was all a tricky tightrope of when are
Yeah.
you professional, when are you parent, how does that merge? How do you balance it all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were to go back to yourself in your younger days, what would be a bit of advice you would give yourself back then?
So I think a little bit like you were saying, that knowledge of it's a phase and it will pass, and you kind of just have to go with that. That's always really helpful. Um,
Because in the moment, it feels like it's going to last forever, doesn't it? It
yeah,
feels like it's
yeah,
never going to change and I'm never going to find
yeah.
a way out of this. And that
And
can leave you feeling quite desperate and quite hopeless as a parent,
yeah,
I think.
absolutely. Um, the other two things I think about come very much from a different part of my life. So I'm also an ultra marathon runner. Um,
Amazing woman. Yes.
yeah, I started running long distances to get out of the house and away from the children in the nicest possible way. But it was very much that it gives you a break
How
and
far could you run? Yeah.
yeah, how far can I get away? Oh, I have to turn around and come back.
We're not going to say that bit, Charlotte.
No.
I like
Um,
it.
but yeah, but now, yeah, I run those really long distances, and two things that I use as absolute mantras for that, which actually have now just become part of life. One of them is that everything is progress, not perfection.
Yeah,
We're not
like it.
looking for perfection. It's about the progress. And you know what? In every hour of the day, you will be making progress in your parenting, in your situation, in how you're managing things. But across a day, you definitely will. And it's not about achieving perfection. It's about that progress. And I constantly have to be kind to my younger self. You know, we did things that weren't right, like, and that I look back on now and think, God, if that happened tomorrow, I would do something completely different.
Mm.
But that's because you know different now,
Yeah.
and you have to be kind to that previous self. So that, yeah, idea of progress, not perfection, I think is really important. And the other one, which is slightly different, is be kind to your future self. And I try and keep this in mind all the time now. So, like, that comes in when it's things like, can I be bothered to do the washing up tonight, or am I going to leave it for the morning?
Yeah.
Actually, however hard it is now, your morning self is going to thank you so much if you just do it now. And be kind to your future self. If you can do one little thing for your tomorrow self that's going to make that tomorrow easier, it's so worth doing, even if it's a
Love that.
tiny thing.
I hadn't even thought
Um,
about it in going that way, going forwards and thinking about how to be kind to yourself.
yeah,
And I heard a
I
little
think,
while ago someone talking about kind of as you get older, and I think I was researching about perimenopause, to be honest, actually. And they were talking about, the importance of strength training, and actually your future self will thank yourself now
yeah,
for, but I hadn't kind of
putting that
thought about it
in.
in relation to parenting. I really like that.
Yeah, I think it's so, just tiny things like I've had it so often, if one of them's left a bag in the car, and like it's just going to take you 2 minutes to go outside, even if you're already in your pajamas, get it out the boot of the car, bring it in. It's just one less thing tomorrow morning. And however tempting it is to go, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll just lock the front door. That thought comes into my head of, no, tomorrow you will really be grateful if you've
Yeah,
just done that one tiny thing.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So those
Well,
things I
I
think
suppose
just,
those kind of tie into kind of what I was going to ask next is if, if there's their parent out there today that's listening who's really struggling at the moment and finding life tough, and whether that be, they might be a parent that have got neurodivergent kids, they might suspect they've got neurodivergent kids, or they might not think that at all. It might just be they're having a really tricky time as a
yeah.
parent. What would be your bit of advice, Charlotte? Have you got some advice?
I wish I'd been better at this, but actually carving yourself out some time and using it really wisely. Like I would often collapse on the sofa and sit scrolling my phone or just sit zombified in front of the TV on a night time. But that's not actually, well, I don't find that really giving myself a break.
Yeah.
I went to a training for parents a few weeks ago and someone was saying, oh, block yourself out half an hour. And I was like, whoa, half an hour is too big. Do you know, if you can get yourself 5 minutes to just do something, step and do something different.
I
Step
agree.
outside and sit in the garden, even if it's
Yeah.
freezing cold. If that's your thing, sit outside for 5 minutes. I don't know, maybe you love drawing. Get yourself a notebook and pen. And even if it's 5 minutes stood at the kitchen counter,
Yeah.
doodle yourself something, draw something. Maybe you love reading. Let yourself read one page in a book, carve that time out for something different to
Yeah.
really give your brain a break, give yourself a break. And it will just be 5 minutes to start with. But if you really value that in every day, you will find that you can stretch it a little bit at a time. And yeah, you know, in 6 months, it might be that you've got half an hour a day, and that would be great. But if it's still just 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes that's yours, and you protect it for all you're worth. It really makes a difference.
It's so important, that bit, isn't it? I think I talk about it a lot on, the Facebook pages, that finding that time for yourself, it's the first thing that goes
Yeah.
when life gets a bit sketchy and you get something, come at you from the side, or a curveball comes in, like life always likes to serve you.
Oh, yes.
The first thing, I don't know about you, but the first thing I drop is anything for me, gone.
Yeah.
And it takes often somebody else to say to me, why aren't you doing it anymore? Before I go, oh yeah, it's just dropped, it's gone off my radar, and I've lost it out of my routine, or my, the patterns that I'll be in. But it's always the first thing that goes,
Yeah.
always. And it's actually probably the one thing that actually needs to stay,
Yeah.
get me through things possibly a bit quicker. And like you say, half an hour can be a massive amount of time, and that's
Oh,
really hard to carve that out, especially if you're in a family when you're in crisis or you're having a tough time, and
and I think
single parents, and
imagining getting half an hour is too daunting.
yeah,
Like,
too
you're
big.
like, no, every minute's precious. I can't spend half an hour doing that. So just make it manageable. 5 minutes is still amazing.
Yeah. Sometimes mine's just a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Sometimes mine's a cup of tea on the back door with the door open. And I don't even care whether it's raining. If it's raining, I don't sit outside. I have the door open. It's
Yeah.
just 5 minutes with a cup of tea that I'm going to drink whilst it's hot,
Yeah.
but not cold, because I've put it down somewhere and forgotten where I've put it. But I often find when I work with parents that, and for myself, you can find somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's manageable. But when you start talking half an hour, it feels too much. And if it
Yeah.
feels too much, you won't do it.
You won't do it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but so important, so important. I just wanted to finish up, Charlotte. Thank you ever so much for talking to us about you and your parenting experience, and linking that with teaching as well, because that's really interesting for me, just linking that in with the teaching side and your teaching experience as well. Thank you for that. But I just wondered if they've got kind of anything at the moment that's going on for you that you wanted to let us know about. I know Charlotte's got a great group that she runs, and she's on Instagram, she's on Facebook, but I'm going to let her tell you a bit about what she's doing, and maybe what's coming up in the future for you, Charlotte.
Yeah. So I've got 2 free PDFs out there at the minute for education staff around adaptations in their classroom, and then a discussion around zones of regulation. And this week, I'm just finishing off a new one called Keeping the Calm in the Chaos of Christmas. Because we all know that
Oh,
Christmas
we
in
need that
schools
one.
goes a bit crazy. And so it's just going to be a little sort of checklist of things that might support those neurodivergent young people in your classrooms or in your settings. We know things slightly go out the window, especially
Yeah.
in primary schools, you know, when there's shows and this, that, and the other. But just some pointers of think about if we can keep some things going for these guys.
And some of those
So that
bits in
should be
there as
out.
well could be helpful for parents, couldn't it? They could
Yeah,
either share it with the schools, or it might be
yeah,
something they might be able to take some of
absolutely.
the kind of techniques and stuff and use in the home environment.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. The Christmas one, definitely, and the adaptations one, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. There's bits you can use in both. And then my grand plan, I hope for 2025, is that I'm going to try and pull together a range of education experts, different settings, um, to host an in-person conference
I'm so
around
excited about this.
around how we provide better education settings for neurodivergent young people,
Mm.
and what that might look like, how we can create that now, as well as kind of that what we would really hope for in the future. So yeah, it's just in the early infancy of kind of ideas and picking people's brains about it and trying to find space for it. But yeah, that's the big aim for
I think
next
that's
year.
so exciting, Charlotte. And I think, I love the way that you work and your style and your knowledge. And I think what you've got a lovely way of working as well is that there's no judgment, that actually, because it can be tough, I can imagine, as a teacher to think, I know I'm not getting this quite right, and to go and look for help, or feeling quite judged by people that you're not getting it right. And I feel
Yeah.
really strongly with you whenever I talk to you. There is no judgment. Actually, people can ask questions, and you'll say it how it is, but you've got a lovely, gentle approach with that as well. That
Yeah,
I
I think
think,
that's so important. And I think that partly again comes from that parent experience of
yeah,
almost feeling judged by other people. And do you know what? We only know what we know. There's no point judging anyone for that. Share what you know.
yeah.
Give them that next step. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Oh, I'm so excited to see that. I think it's going to be a brilliant thing. I'm waiting to hear more about that, and we'll look out for that in the new year. Thank you ever so much, Charlotte. I really appreciate you coming on today and giving us your time and talking to us about parenting, about schools, about teachers, and what you've got coming up. And that we wish you lots of luck. And I'm going to be following you
Thank
from now
you.
on, and looking forward to your conference type thing in the new year. But thank you ever so much.
Lovely.